All right.
Naujok.
All right. This is actually the third time lucky. Welcome to another Have a Chat. I am speaking to Belinda, or with Belinda Naujok, who is a wonderful teacher from New South Wales, who has just completed the Conceptual Coordinate Geometry course and the Engaged Maths course a year ago. And I believe, according to what she's written, and I've taken some quotes, that she's enjoying teaching more and is teaching a bit more conceptually based, a bit more focus on understanding up front rather than procedures, and more student-centred. And the students are taking a bit more responsibility for their learning. So that is my summary of what Belinda's told me through the course is, and I'd just like to have a chat with her about this and find out something. So before I hit you with your quotes, Belinda, that you can comment on, would you like to just say anything first up, or should I just hit you with your quotes?
Well, I think it was the realization that you came to that I hadn't really comprehended, but I think that the big win I had with just teaching in this way was because I did the conceptual engagement of mathematics first.
Right.
Before I did the conceptual geometry, like the coordinate geometry.
Right.
So I did understanding how teaching mathematics conceptually can be better for engagement.
Right.
Before I did it specifically for coordinate geometry.
So just with a bit of backstory.
So that's my recommendation already.
So just as a bit of backstory, there's a course, the course that I abbreviate to the Engaged Mathematics course. So that's what Belinda did first, which is a fairly long journey. The end result is teaching in a way that is highly structured and allows the teacher to have a lot of input, but it actually allows the kids to have a lot of choice about what they're doing and when they're doing it. And I think this is sort of a question and a statement at the same time, Belinda, but would you agree that when students are given choice in a more student-centred approach, that has a massive impact on their engagement?
100%.
Right.
It's changed everything.
And is that something that you weren't? Did that surprise you when you saw it happen?
Yeah, I think so. I think the thing that has surprised me the most is students actively saying that they prefer this method of learning, which has been the statements, especially for my Year 10 students.
Yes, and I totally agree. And look, it's really difficult to nail this down in a 5-point plan or something, and that's why we have a long course that sort of lays it out for people. And it's not just one strategy or one approach. There's a range of things.
No, you have to be flexible.
Yeah. So, but then there's the formative assessment and conceptual coordinate geometry course, which I know most maths teachers say, well, I don't need to do that because I've taught coordinate geometry 100 times. But that's where it puts this conceptually based and student-centered approach together, but in just one unit. And even teachers who aren't teaching that topic, in the foreseeable future, they can still apply those techniques to something else. But I found it really interesting because I think you might be one of the first people who's done both courses, and and I've really saw the lights come on for you with the coordinate geometry course. So you are, and we'll talk about some of the things you've said. Now here's something I would like to mention though, because a lot of people think, but if you teach a bit more conceptually or you teach in a bit more of a student-centered way, that's okay for the top kids, but I can't do it with my classes because they're sort of middle of the range or lower. And I've always said, no. So what did you say about that?
I say no way in hell. I did it with a stage 5.1. So for anyone who's not in New South Wales and therefore doesn't teach to the New South Wales curriculum while everyone else teaches to the Australian curriculum, New South Wales splits mathematics in year 9 and 10 into 3 stages, 5.3 being the top, 5.2 and then 5.1. No, seriously, 5.1 is probably where majority of students fall, but we find mathematically they're the people that don't tend to enjoy it.
Yeah, I think you described this class as your typical beat your head against the wall class.
Oh, absolutely. If you try to tell them what to do, they're just going to sit there for the next half an hour and just go, I don't understand it, I don't get it, I don't get it.
Right. So you are beating your head against the brick wall, trying to teach them traditionally, like step by step, because this is what a lot of teachers think. The lower the standard of students,
The more instruction that they need.
the more structure, the more talking at them they need, right? Step 1, do this. Step 2, do that. Step 3, do this. And you've discovered the opposite to be true.
Absolutely. Not only did I not give them any formalized sets of notes, I actually got this class to create their own notes because these notes were going to be used for their end assessment.
Right.
I actually took photos. It's kind of hard to share, but I actually took photos of one student's notes and they almost mirrored what I would have given them in the first place.
And so just to, this is going to be abstract to someone who hasn't seen these courses, but in the Conceptual Coordinate Geometry course, rather than teaching coordinate geometry, where I don't know what's typically started. I think we start off with a distance formula and then we do the gradient formula and the midpoint formula or something like that, and then you start trying to piece it together and then you do the algebra. And I always found that students, even some of the top students, like that, they might be able to get the answers, but they got no idea what's really going on. And I used to tutor pre-calculus kids who had no understanding of the relationship between ordered pairs, an equation of a straight line, and the gradient. They had no idea. And I could see that this was simply because they've been taught procedurally. And so in this course, we look at the distance and the midpoint and the gradient, but not from the traditional perspective. It's all from
formula.
They're getting their hands dirty with the concepts, aren't they? They're playing around with stuff on a coordinate plane. Did you do that?
They had to use their understanding of middle and their understanding of gradient that they'd already built up to anyway.
Yeah.
And distance, which we linked back to Pythagoras, which was something that they were comfortable with.
Yeah.
So we tried to make the connections.
And so when you hit them with the procedures, with the formulas, they go.
I never gave them formulas.
Oh, you didn't? You never did them
No.
at all?
I never gave them formal formulas simply because a lot of these people will in fact do standard maths. Well, they don't really get much choice, but they'll be doing standard mathematics in year 11 and 12.
Right.
You don't get the formulas then either.
No, but I'm saying in the unit of work though, then you must have looked at the distance formula at some point.
We did, but no, we never actually formalised the distance formula at all.
So they just
kept it to their connection and to their understanding.
Awesome. Well, in my experience, when I did present those, the students would go, "Oh, this is what we've been doing for the last 2 days, sir." I go, "Exactly." So did you do the thing where you would have used GeoGebra so that you're showing a line and saying, this line's, look, I'm a magician. This line, I tell you, it's a gradient of 3. And the kids are looking, and then this one's got a gradient of 2, and this one's got a gradient of 2/3. And then some kids going, "Oh, I know how you're doing that, miss. I know how you're doing that." Is that what you did for gradient?
We spent a whole 50-minute lesson going through that and allowing people to start clicking with the line and
was that
what
fun?
It was doing. The people that weren't there, I think we had 2 students that weren't there that day, they struggled.
Right.
They definitely struggled more than other people did.
And then did you flip it around then and say, right, I'm going to put a line on the grid here, and then you tell me the gradient and all that sort of stuff?
Absolutely. That was most of the time.
Yeah. And so it's so much more engaging, and it bypasses the algebra, which is the thing that kind of gets those sorts of kids in particular.
I never formally introduced them to y equals mx plus b until well into the topic.
So your kids are, so-called strugglers. Were they able at some point to look at a simple line? A simple line meaning a line that goes through corners of your squares on the grid. So like, a y equals 2/3 x plus 6 or something like that. Or were you able to place that sort of line down and then have some kids go, "Oh, that's without making a table of ordered pairs and all that"? Were they able to go, "Oh, that's y equals 2x plus 3"?
they were able to go to the equation of the line, and then we flipped it. I gave them the equation of the line, and they were able to draw it without a table of values.
And the thing I've always found is the table of values confuses them because they don't see the connection between the tables and values and the ordered pairs. I mean, as teachers, we think it's obvious, but I think there's something in there that confuses the heck out of kids, and it's boring as anything.
So they worked it much, much better without the algebra.
So it's really impressive. This is what I'm trying to say. It's really impressive. And like if you have a more average class, I mean, it sounds like yours is sort of below average in terms of performance.
There are definitely some strugglers in there.
Yeah. But with an average class, you can have them within the first couple of lessons just looking at the line and go, oh, that's y equals 2/3 x plus 6. Bang. It's just reading it off the line. And that's why we stick with a gradient intercept form for almost until the end of the unit. I don't know if you might not have got to the general form.
We didn't do general form at all.
You didn't need to.
We didn't go there.
But the point is, it's intuitive and it makes sense and it feeds into the concept. So it's a really simple turnaround. All right. So now I'll play devil's advocate because there's a worksheet series that the kids can work through. So that's partly where the student-centered aspect happens, because then they're free to progress at their own pace. Well, that's not going to work, Belinda, because you're going to have kids who are up to like level 5 or something on here doing algebraic substitution. You've got other kids down here still doing the distance formula thing on those grids. So it's not going to work. How can you possibly cater if it's student-centered and if all the kids are spread out?
So I just did the one whole class instruction once.
Yep.
Throughout the whole entire topic, right at the beginning, I did the whole class instruction, and then students are allowed to work at their own pace. So I had the people that would fly through, like certain aspects, like a couple of them really, really engaged with it significantly, and I had to give them some extension stuff to keep them busy at the end. But I had some people that were still at the point where they were plotting lines and doing distance and all that sort of stuff. These guys are off to extension.
So how are you coping with that differently to what you would have coped a couple of years ago?
So obviously I was keeping track of where each student was up to. So I had my own little checklist, so I knew who was doing what.
Right.
So those guys would all kind of congregate together so that they could work together. And I was able to give that group of kids instructions where they needed it. But it allowed me to check in with each individual student to see where they were getting stuck and what they needed help with.
So do you think working this way, which is much more student-centered, but it's highly structured, isn't it? It's not like you're chucking
it has to be structured, yes.
You're not chucking out a heap of equipment and saying, go knock yourselves out, see what you can learn about coordinate geometry, and I'll just sit here at my desk and smoke my pipe. Like
Oh no, I'm actually busier, I think, during these lessons.
Right.
Get to spend more time with the students.
Would you agree, though, that having a structured unit like this that is student-centered allows you more ability to spend one-on-one time with small groups of kids than if you're teaching in a traditional, okay, here's the next routine you've got to learn, write it down, do 5, here's the next routine, blah, blah, blah?
100%.
Why?
100%. So you've got the people who won't need your help, but because they have come to their own conclusions about what it is that they need to do, you find that even if they were the ones that were constantly seeking assistance, clarifying things, they seem to have the more confidence to not need you as much anymore, and they're actually freeing up your time to spend with the people that do need more assistance. So you find with those guys, it's 1 or 2 sentences and off they run.
Right.
With some of the other guys that need a little bit more one-on-one time, you get to spend that time, and you find you're able to do that with more and more students.
See, I think traditionally, like if I'm the student and you're the teacher, you've written something on the board, right? I'm kind of learning by distance. I'm one step removed. So I'm writing down what you're doing, and then when I'm doing my examples, I'm really just following whatever you did. And so, if I get stuck, if I can't get you, I'm sunk, right? And so, and it's like, I don't know what you'd even call that, but it's not really learning as such. Whereas in this model, the kids are actually they're drawing on
figuring out how to do it themselves.
They're drawing on the conceptual understanding of how this thing works. That's what I call it, getting their hands dirty. So they're actually much more actively involved in the process of, finding the distance or finding the gradient, or because they're drawing on their own understanding, aren't they, rather than what you've written on the board. Sorry?
This is how I used to do it back at school. I was always in a class where people were moving too slow for me, so I was constantly working ahead and figuring things out for myself. We're just putting these students in an environment of what I used to do in school anyway.
Right. And so can you raved about this thing called mini lessons.
Yeah.
So do you want to, rather than me rabbit on about what I think that is, do you want to explain your perspective?
With my version of a mini lesson, once students have completed something, all you need to do is give them the next item that they're up to, whatever that might be. So if it was distance, gradient, midpoint, so I'd sit there and I'd say, okay, this is what we're going to be doing now. I'd ask them.
So you're talking to 2, 3, 4, 5 kids at once?
Yeah.
Right.
Pretty much.
Who are up to that point?
Who are up to that point. They're ready to move on to that point. And I'd 9 times out of 10 ask them, what do you think you're going to have to do?
Right.
And the ones that were developing a confidence and starting to make sort of connections would realize, okay, so gradient, we've already done that. And so automatically in their brain, they're constructing a triangle. And I've gone, what else can you do with a right-angled triangle? And they figure out they can work out the distance from that. And I've gone, okay, so midpoint, what do you think you can do to find midpoint? And so that right-angled triangle became really, really powerful for them.
Right.
And they would fly through the concept. But with that instruction and that specific questioning just for those people, because you can alter the questions depending on who you're talking to.
So,
like, very specific.
Would you agree there's a massive difference? It's subtle, but a paradigm shift as well. Having 3 or 4 kids come to this point and saying, Miss, we need to know how to do this next thing, is a paradigm shift from you saying, right, class, stop. I know what you need to do next, and this is what it is. Pens down, watch the board, blah, 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 blah. Here it is. Take it down. Now do those 5. It's a paradigm shift, isn't it?
The people that are not up to that point in their own learning are not going to hear a single thing you say, no matter how quiet that room is.
So when someone says to you, you do mini lessons, so you repeat yourself 5 times during that, that's ridiculous, because you're saying the same thing over and over again.
And you repeat yourself in any normal lesson anyway, because kids aren't ready to hear what you have to say at the board.
Except this time you're repeating to kids who are asking, hey, Miss,
they tend to only ask once.
Yeah. So in a really subtle, in a minor way, but it's a major way, you're creating a need for these kids to learn the next thing. Miss,
which is my favourite.
Which is, I'm up to here, right? I'm up to here. Hey, coordinate geometry doesn't completely blow me away, but I'm happy to be in the class, and it's kind of fun collaborating with everyone. And I'm up to here. I want to learn. I want to know this next thing. That's completely different to you dictating to them, saying, "You need to learn this now because I said so." And here we go.
No, it's definitely different, and creating that, as you've put it in previous course that I did, the brick wall strategy.
Yeah.
It has definitely become my favorite way of teaching, like actually forcing kids to hit the wall first before they start asking.
So instead of, if you're teaching trigonometry, instead of saying, right, kids, now I'm going to teach you how to find angles instead of sides in right angle triangles. Everyone stop. Here's the calculator thing, blah, 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 boom, go do it. You just insert that into the worksheet, and these kids are sailing along, and then they hit the brick wall, and they go, Sir, how do you find angles? And then that's Johnny. He's always at the top. You see, so say, come on, Johnny, you work it out. Just have another look at it, knowing damn well it won't. But you're just waiting for a few other kids. You're jollying him along, because he deserves to be hit the wall a few times. And you wait for a few. Who else wants to hear this? Right, I'm talking to you guys. And don't you find that in those little teaching segments, it only takes you a third the amount of time to teach that as when you used to do it globally.
Third or less.
Right.
Like a third or less. It's straight to the point. It's because you know how when you're teaching and you've got the kid who goes, I can't do this.
Yeah.
And you spend most of your time trying to figure out what it is that you don't understand.
Yeah.
Because they can't communicate to you what it is that they don't get.
Yeah.
I find that's where most of my time when I'm dealing with questions is wasted.
Yeah. But Belinda, this all sounds good in theory, but it doesn't work because it takes longer. You know, anytime you try and do something conceptually or more student-centered, it takes longer, and we don't, as you know, there's too much in the content in the curriculum anyway. So I'd like to do that, but it takes more time than. So that's why I do it. I teach traditionally, step by step.
No, once again, it's weird having gone through the process now, all these things that you said, and you can be as doubtful as you want, but it doesn't actually take longer.
Yeah.
It takes the exact same amount of time as it normally would, and you may find that you've got your students that get accelerated where you may not have allowed that to happen before.
I've actually found in some units it saved me time, but it certainly doesn't. And look, the problem.
I use that extra time for extension.
The problem is, and look, I'm obviously an enthusiast for this model of teaching because because would you agree that teaching this way the end result is you have far less kids having no clue what's going on in a lot of lessons. Like you almost have almost all of your kids are on the ball, they understand. Whereas traditionally, by default, if you're teaching step by step by step by step, and sure, you throw in some interesting other activities now and then, but if that's your default thing, by default, that method has to have kids not getting what's going on because they can't follow what you're doing on the board, and then the first few questions they're in the dark, and then they might get a bit of a sense, but they're not fully understanding what's going on.
And they tend to get left way behind because you as a class will have continually moved on, and you get about 4 lessons down the track and they're gone.
But having said that, though, I spent a lot of years working this stuff out, and it's not that I've invented anything new. I mean, because I read about it later, I thought, oh, that's okay. I discovered this, but I didn't really discover it. I was just putting stuff together in a way that made sense to me because I was so frustrated, boring the pants off kids. But on that journey, I did throw away a lot of lessons where I thought, this is going to be great, and I'd try this thing and it would just bomb. The kids might have had fun, but they didn't learn anything. And it's like, why doesn't that work? And then, so I think a lot of teachers have tried these different things that are more student-centered and more conceptual, but it doesn't work because the pedagogy is not right. And then they go, oh, well, it doesn't work, so I'll stick to what I've got. Because in most courses, in my experience, there's not a roadmap given. It's like, here are these great theories and it's wonderful, so, knock yourself out. But there's no roadmap. It's like, well, how does this work? So that's what I've tried to do with these courses, and I'm just glad that you've...
No, and the documentation that comes with this course that kind of gives you an understanding of the exercise and the way it is built up and everything is the exact roadmap, I think, that a lot of teachers at least need to expose themselves to at least once, to better understand how this can be applied to different content areas as well.
Right. So
that's what I'm doing now.
Do you think, so if you'd done the Conceptual Coordinate Geometry course just on its own, if you hadn't done the other one, do you think you would have got as much out of it?
I don't think I would have been, I think I would have still tried to structure it in a way where I still had complete control.
Right.
Like, I think I would have struggled to release the control that we as teachers naturally have in a classroom to allow students to develop the spread that they needed to do, because people are different ability levels.
I think that's a really interesting point, because like 13, 14 years ago, I was running a lot of these activities in a face-to-face setting, and I was wondering why it wasn't really working. And then I realised, hang on, I spent like a decade transitioning from tradition to this kind of model, because it's a paradigm shift. It's a big shift in pedagogy, right? And I realised if you just throw a conceptual strategy or some activity to a teacher who doesn't use that pedagogy, they're going to try and put that into a highly structured, teacher-directed, step-by-step approach, and it doesn't work. And then the teacher goes, well, there you go, Richard, it doesn't work anyway, so what are you talking about, right?
And I feel that is what I would have done.
Yeah. And that's why, that coordinate geometry course was actually created first. I thought, I just want to dabble with these ideas. And the few people that did do it gave me so much positive feedback. I thought, I think I need to create a big course that just talks about this whole conceptual approach thing. So that's great. Look, I just love getting the feedback where people are are really passionate, or teachers are passionate, and they're seeing the point of it all. Can I just try and dig out some little things you said here? So you've said that this was after you'd implemented this unit with this class.
I did the whole unit.
That's now one of your favourite classes, I would suspect. You said
no, still year 10.
said I've created a similar kind of situation for statistics. I'm running it with the same group, so the expectations of how it's going to work is not needed, and they've gotten stuck straight into it. So that's interesting.
They've gotten straight into it, and to the point now where everyone's flowing through it. It's the last topic we need to do for the year, but we've gotten through so much of it that we've gone on to quartiles, box and whisker plots, and we'll probably start bivariate data by the end of the week.
We high school maths teachers, I say this a lot, I've written about it, we are the least able people to understand what it's like for students to be in maths classrooms not understanding what's going on. And
we are the worst people.
Because we always understood it. And if we could sit in their brains for 5 minutes, we would be staggered about how horrific it is. But there's hope. Because you've demonstrated if you tackle mathematics teaching in a way that allows them to understand first up from kind of first principles, from getting their hands dirty, from activities that make sense to them, it completely changes. And so, because you've mentioned engagement on a couple of little comments here, so we're back into the coordinate geometry here. You said students did engage with the interactions as we talked about the aspects of straight lines, and because it was so different, they immediately demonstrated a willingness to question and provide information.
The one thing that surprised me is that students were giving it a go.
Yeah. And
they were okay with getting it wrong.
Right.
Because you know how students can be sometimes terrified of being incorrect all the time?
Yeah.
These guys were giving it a go, correcting their mistakes, trying to develop the understanding, where by the end of the time, they actually did, by default, develop their understanding.
And this is a class that never does any homework, refuses to do homework.
No, I don't give them homework because I know it will not get done. This is the class that did the least during lockdown. Like, they were zero communication online, whereas every other class I had at least some communication. This was the class that had no communication online.
And yet you said, I'm trying to find the quote, but you'll remember it, but you said you were really impressed because 4 weeks later they had their yearly.
Yes, so 4 weeks from ending the topic. So we'd done stuff in between. So we've done a whole 2 other units of work in between finishing that and then doing their common yearly task. And by far, not only were their results excellent 4 weeks later, it was equivalent of the kids in the 5.2 course, what they were getting in their yearly, and they don't revise.
Your kids don't revise?
Oh, God, no.
Right. So they, because they got their hands dirty, because it was their own understanding of what was going on, it carried over.
It bled into it. Yeah.
And those sorts of kids would normally be out the window, like.
Oh no, 2 in a section, and they'd be partying.
Yeah, right. That's awesome.
That was the one that 100% sold me, because I've gone, understanding means that you don't have to worry about all of this revision and all of this homework and reinforcing the concepts. Revision will genuinely become a natural part if they want to improve upon their results.
Yeah.
But it doesn't become the necessity to just get a basic result.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I refuse to take, or have the courses take all the credit, though, because there's most participants that come through these courses are fantastic, but some are better than others. And I think you're someone who's particularly open. You're ripe for both courses, meaning that you're really ready for it. And so if you go back a few years, have you been sort of looking for other ways? Like, were you always had a sense that there was another way to go?
I've been concerned by trends. I guess you can call them trends of what I've been seeing at the HSC level.
Yeah.
And the stuff that kids are just not getting.
Yeah.
And trying to figure out and understand why this might be happening. So I was definitely looking for something because I've gone, okay, engagedness had to have become a part of it. Like, are they just not paying attention? Do they not care? How can I make this more interesting for them? So it started off with that,
Yeah.
and then it led
Because
into
a lot of teachers, someone mentions engagement, so you're talking about games and chocolates and making it fun and entertaining the kids, right? Because that's often a misconception, isn't it?
never do that.
No, well, neither do I. But that's not like,
No, that in my brain is an engagement. Engagement in my brain is when they show that they actually understand what
Yeah.
is going on.
yeah,
So for me and with mathematics, and can we just pause for a second to
sure.
see if kids are lining up outside?
Yeah.
Right here. No guarantee that I won't have to move.
We're only 30 seconds from winding up anyway.
Yeah, but for me, it's a case of I was looking for something that was going to stop what I saw as a bleeding of results at the HNC level. So engagement to me was a critical part of that. And then I've taken on the conceptual coordinate geometry because I don't know about other schools, but at this school, kids were particularly weak in that area. So I was looking for something that could hopefully change either our attitude towards it or at least encourage them to change theirs.
I honestly think if kids were taught this way, like where they're getting their, because you can apply this to almost any topic. There are some topics you could argue that surds is a bit harder to kind of do this way, but there's a lot of topics you can apply this sort of thing to, and those critical topics that are the crash and burn topics, like kids who don't do well in coordinate geometry or fractions, decimals, percentage, they never go on to advanced maths at year 11, 12.
Exactly.
But I reckon, that's because they don't understand what's going on. I really believe if kids were taught this way, a lot more of those kids would do well in trigonometry and coordinate geometry and all that, those sorts of key areas, and they go, okay, well, I'll give this a crack. Yep. That's what I think. I can't prove it, but you know. Hey, look,
okay,
Belinda, we'll wind up. Thanks.
Okay, no problem.
Thanks so much. It's been awesome to chat with you. Your kids must love you as a teacher, and I think they're very lucky. And we'll speak to you again sometime.
Thank you very much.